Air pollution, not just here in Delhi, but across many cities of India, is quite literally killing us. And if you don't believe me, take a look at the numbers. In 2015, 1.1 million Indians died from deaths linked to air pollution. That number is slated to go up to 1.7 million by 2030 if we do not take urgent measures of intervention. And it could go up to over 3 million by 2050. That's how bad it is. And yet, we seem to have reached this situation where we have either surrendered, given up, or worse still, normalized this hell that we're literally living in and with. What is responsible for air pollution, and is there something that we can all do about it? My guest today on Behes with Barkha is Bharati Chaturvedi, well-known activist, environmental activist in particular, who heads Chintan and has really devoted so much of her time to this issue. Bharati, I've been reading your tweets and your comments, and I think this word normalizing air pollution was first used by you. What explains it? Because so many of us in so many cities in India are mysteriously sick suddenly all the time. We've got watery eyes, we've got headaches, we've got a bad throat, we're sniffling, we're asthmatic. Yet we don't seem to believe that this is as bad as it sounds.
Well, I think one of the things we want as a population is we want to say A and plus B will equal C, and air pollution is so complex and so absolutely wicked that it isn't a cause-effect thing that's so easy to understand. I think the second thing is we're really lazy. If we could say press this button, then people would have pressed that button and said, okay, we're through with air pollution. Just like, stop sugar and then you might lose weight. So we don't have those kinds of...
We don't have a simple cause and effect.
Yeah, and air pollution is exactly the problem that requires all of us, particularly privileged people, to voluntarily undertake extraordinary inconvenience in our lives, which means scaling down many things that contribute to the pollution. And that's why it's so difficult for people to even want to acknowledge that there's a problem.
But I've been reading this terrifying literature on the links between air pollution and health, mental health. They're now talking about how the development of the brain could be linked to pollution levels, as women, menstrual cycles, even PCOD. And yet we're not willing to see this as a public health emergency.
It's a multiple level emergency, because on one hand, when anyone gets ill, it's women who actually have to be caregivers in most places. Because if your child is ill, you can't go to work, you have to stay home. It doesn't matter what strata of society you're from. You have to take that kid to the doctor after 2 days. You're losing income, especially if you're a daily wager, or if you're somebody who's, work in a factory, or if you're a domestic worker, you don't show up for 4 days, people threaten to cut your money. So I think it works at so many levels. Economically, I think women and children are so badly hit by air pollution, and yet I think we haven't risen out enough. And I think part of the crisis around air pollution is that nobody is sure what magic button or buttons to press, but that these don't exist to begin with.
Before we look at the magic buttons to the ones that don't exist, to try and see how it could be made better, there also isn't unanimity on what the main causes are. And one of the big debates is around the stubble burning by farmers of Punjab and Haryana. You yourself have written about the fact that farmers must be pushed from paddy cultivation, which there's a glut of, it's using too much water underground, all of that, to millets. But there are farmers who are hitting back and saying that, look, what we do, okay, it's wrong, okay, we're contributing, but we are seasonal. This happens, 2 months in the year, a few weeks in those 2 months. Why are you blaming us for it? So let me ask you very clinically, how much is stubble burning responsible for what?
Stubble burning is only responsible for about 6 weeks of our air pollution, and worst case, of course, it's intense. It's 37% on the worst days, and it's less on other days. It can be, it becomes zero after a few weeks. But the point is that air pollution is contributing to a very high base. So, if we had clean air the rest of the year, then 37% would not make it unhealthy even. The point is, all the rest of the weeks, those 48 weeks, we ourselves across North India and in Delhi included, we're absolutely axing our feet. And for sure, vehicular emissions are a very, very serious problem. And I understand from transport specialists and scientists that we completely shouldn't forget that two-wheelers are very specifically a problem. And many of these people have pointed out to me, in conversations when I've tried to understand the fine nuances of transport, that frankly, anytime you're ordering something, they said freight and two-wheelers are criminal for the air, which means every time we're ordering something online and somebody comes on a two-wheeler and delivers it.
You mean the Zomato, Swiggy things that we use unthinkingly n number of times a day, Amazon?
Actually, and I've heard this from sources who I think are spectacularly well informed and understand data, and what they're telling us is that it's a lifestyle thing that's contributing to it. Having said that, we can easily move a lot of these onto things like buses, for example, if they were reliable, if they were affordable, and if they reached last mile. But we don't have that system right now. We don't have buses. Even metros don't actually take us to the last mile.
And they're expensive. Metros are expensive for a lot of people.
And business models won't be able to move towards a metro model, because then the delivery boy will walk endlessly. But what we can do is to put up a really fantastic bus service across, for example, NCR, because you can't just have this bus service in Delhi and then have Noida all polluted.
So I was just going to pull out a figure. The Central Pollution Board actually said that cars by themselves cause 3% of the pollution in the national capital, but if you add up all the vehicles, it contributes 28%. So let's look first at vehicular pollution. It's kind of like a wake-up call to say that every time we're ordering something off Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato, Swiggy, which all of us do n number of times a day, we're contributing to this toxic air. But governments are hesitant to include, let's say, two-wheelers in an odd-even scheme.
Of course, yeah.
Do you think that's political populism, or do you think that's understandable, given that this is a strata of society that can't necessarily afford the metro or Uber or whatever the equivalent is?
I think this is I understand, and I have empathy for people on two-wheelers, because there's a reason why they're on two-wheelers and themselves breathing in so much of this pollution. But I also see them as victims of government paralysis, as if somehow, I can talk of Delhi, where I kind of feel that somebody's just Botoxed all the files and now they can't move anymore, and they just won't go anywhere. And we're not being able to procure these buses, and we've been asking for this, but
where is it stuck?
It's not moved. I mean, where is that political pressure? I mean, it's as if somebody came in the night and just injected Botox across our political system, and now we cannot move, we cannot be flexible, we cannot stretch, and we cannot get those 11 to 13,000 buses that this city needs. Because when we got those buses, we could have created really big incentives for such persons to move onto those buses. Right now, there's a ghost bus system here.
Yeah. So would you support an odd-even scheme if it continues to exempt two-wheelers as it does? It exempts women. There's so many exemptions in it that actually, even the Supreme Court said that with so many exemptions, it's not effective.
That's a really difficult one, because I think, odd and even has been made, into a standalone. Oh, come on, let's do odd and even. But odd and even should be rolled out in a context where you don't deliver in 3 days, where you deliver in 10 days, in a context where you don't deliver, where you don't go to work every day, you work out of home, in a context where you have at least 10,000 buses on the road. So I think it's odd and even is really a contextual thing, and therefore putting it as a standalone, little bit of a vitamin B12 shot so you feel more energetic is not going to work.
And where does this proposal for more buses stand?
Well, there aren't more buses. That's where it stands.
What does that mean?
That means that we haven't got the buses, not for Delhi, not for our the kind of buses that we should have. We need about 13,000 buses.
I mean, can't we get a business house in this country to just fund 13,000 buses?
We have so much money lying in the with green cess. We've not been able to move from government to deciding, getting those buses, buying those buses. I don't think it's a money problem. I think it's fundamentally our government has failed us, and I don't understand why this has happened why this spectacular inability of Delhi government to produce buses? It's not that difficult. In fact, many years ago when CNG was happening, we've seen officers very much like the ones we have today, dynamic people, who've been able to risk everything and say, let's get the CNG on the road. And I just feel that somehow Delhi government has gone into such a strange confrontational mode with its officers that the officers aren't willing to, take that brunt and take that risk. Because last time it was the officers who had the confidence that they could just order, and they, one of them told me, he said, I wasn't scared, I knew we had to clean up Delhi. And I said, baad mein CM kuch bolengi to fir dekha jayega. Now that's changed now.
But the other day I was furiously tweeting the Delhi Chief Minister and saying, do this, do that. And Ramachandra Guha wrote back to me, this is all happening on Twitter, saying that, look, the Delhi Chief Minister has his role to play, but this is actually a national story. And one of the mistakes that we're making is to make this only about Delhi. And if you look at the list of, the most polluted cities in the world, and I just looked at that city, there were some days when Delhi wasn't on that list. Absolutely. And other cities that are on that list are Mumbai and Calcutta.
And don't forget that although Chennai is not on that list, the fact that Chennai has been so polluted in the last 1 month, it doesn't have stubble burning problems, is transportation and industrial activities. And most of us have this North Indian mentality where we say, "Arey, South mein to koi problem hi nahi hai." But there's a big problem. I mean, Chennai can't breathe. It couldn't a few weeks ago.
But talking about the South, MS Swaminathan said that the North Indian farmers need to learn from the South Indian farmers, because South Indian farmers do not burn stubble. They take the stubble and they convert it into fodder. They, in a sense, monetize that stubble further instead of treating it as waste. Do you think that that is viable? Because a lot of farmers, and you've written about this, say we can't afford these machines. Pay us 100 rupees per quintal and compensate us, because otherwise we don't have the money for this technology.
So I think fundamentally North Indian farmers, particularly Haryana, Punjab, have been pushed into a corner, because what's been happening is they had this Punjab's Preservation of Subsoil Water Act. And the idea was not to let paddy take up all the groundwater, but instead let it synchronize with monsoons. And that made the cycle of cultivation end just before the next cycle. So nobody had time to take it out and they would burn it. Now additionally what's happened is labor has become really expensive in Punjab. It's become very difficult to come by. And Manrega's success has also kind of been a disincentive for casual laborers to go streaming in outside of UP and Bihar. So I really believe that farmers, I think policymakers really have to first get rid of that. Secondly, we have to really find incentives to create markets for millets or whatever you grow. I don't agree with corn at all. Many people push for corn. I think corn is a very unsustainable crop, and we don't want to get into a whole other crisis with corn. But there are millets, and this is what the farmers have also told me, that in fact one of the farmers looked at me and he said, "Acha, so will you stop eating your chawal if I grow millets, or will But I think, for example, the midday meals, millets are so nutritious. Why don't we create that as a market? We have seen that in the Deccan, that organic food sourced from farmers have helped farmers to grow organic. So I think there's a win-win if we look at existing markets and mainstream millets and other kinds of sustainable crops there, and get rid of this whole thing about rice.
What about other factors? The road dust, power plants. Their contribution isn't spoken about. Trucks, at any point, there's supposed to be much more restriction on the entry of trucks, but you will see lorries replacing trucks having the same fuel emissions.
Absolutely. I think there's no alternative except to kind of completely transform 2 or 3 things. One of them is really our fuels. I mean, you burn lousy fuels, you'll have more pollution. But for that, the refineries really have to transform, and they have to do it really fast. And you have to, you really need push from the top, push or a danda from the top, because it seems that everybody puts air pollution second. And I think we need that level of change. We are moving to, Euro 6 very soon. But that won't be for the whole spectrum of transportation. So I think firstly we need to look at fuels. Secondly, I think Delhi itself is surrounded by all kinds of power plants which are very polluting, and I think it's very important not to talk of Delhi, because I would hate to live in the neighborhood of one of those power plants, and many of us growing up in Delhi lived next to that Badarpur power plant, or even that Mathura Road power plant, which was absolutely horrible. But I think we have to really push for cleaner standards for power plants. That's already happening, but it's really slow and it gets postponed.
Explain, you speak about the Botox in the system that has caused this kind of paralysis where no one's willing to move. What explains the Botox in the people? Like, why are we not angrier? Why is this not the main electoral issue? Why is this what we're not voting in or out, as the case may be, politicians on? In any other country, this would be a major election issue.
Oh yeah. And I think part of the reason, I'm very surprised, and I've been trying to understand it, and I've been talking to people proactively, and I think people firstly are in denial, and secondly I think there's not enough ABC out there for people to understand the issue.
What are the kinds of denial? Like, something you were saying interesting before the interview was the moment people see the sun is out.
Yeah.
We think that the sun is out today, so the pollution must be less.
Exactly. And so many people I know have stepped out on a sunny day when it's hazardous air and said, and this is recent, and said, now it's okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is people feel, oh, if I'm indoors, I'm okay. No, you're not okay. Indoor air is terrible. But it cannot be cleaned until the outdoor air is also clean. So you have to fight for that. I think the third thing is that people feel this is a fight between various governments. Governments are our governments. I mean, if they're fighting, we've got to go and make them stop fighting by giving them a big push. We are the voters, but they don't look at it. And I fourthly feel that people are hugely just lazy and just believe that they'll be spared of lung cancer and their children will be spared. But we know that's not the case. It's just that till it hits you personally, it doesn't hit most people.
It'll happen to someone else, not to me.
Yeah.
There is something so dystopian about the times we live in. It's now, you're seeing children, you have politicians coming in putting masks on little children. You've had schools shut down. You have tourists who come to Delhi taking photographs wearing masks. But there's also a class war here that isn't addressed. So you have some oxygen bar opening in the middle of the city. South Delhi,
yes.
No less. And then you have poor people who can't even afford to think about this.
Exactly. And look at the street vendors. I mean, everyone who's out there providing the office worker, chola bhatura, and everyone who's selling cheap goods on the pavements.
Or the traffic police.
Traffic police, waste pickers, kabadi walas, the whole gamut, cobblers. I mean, cobblers I feel very strongly for, because they're sitting down. Anyone who's sitting down is actually at tailpipe level, including little children, because they're not tall. You're breathing emissions straight away, unrefined, undiluted. So I think when we talk of solutions, and that is why I always say, let's not have those conversations about which air purifier is the best.
Let's not. It's too elite a conversation.
I also feel it distracts from the fact that if we don't clean the air, then a huge chunk of our population in India, informal sector is almost 90% of livelihoods across India, and about 70% in urban India. These guys are left out of the debate. And we will continue to see 1 lakh people in India die every month from air pollution.
1 lakh every month?
Every month. And we won't know that because we don't move as elites and people with huge voices and influencers. We may or may not necessarily know these people who are getting cardiac arrests, who are getting strange diseases like lung cancers without being smokers. People like that, we won't know them. We won't know that somebody is mentally depressed because of air pollution. And because of that, we will always leave them out of conversations unless there is only one conversation, and that is to get the AQI under 100 every single day across India.
So I want you to take us through the biggest myths around air pollution and then the biggest stumbling block. So let's start with the myths. So one is the sun is out.
The sun is out.
The second is if we're indoor, we're safe.
We are safe. Of course, that's not true. The third thing is that, unless it's dark maroon, you have these AQI colors, and dark maroon is the worst. And people say it's only red and orange. You know, red and orange, we're very fragile people, and we need to accept that the human bodies can be very resilient, but it's not designed for this. And therefore, people tell me, today it's not too bad, you know, it's 400, so I'll take.
This is the normalization.
And I think not being excessively careful, this whole myth that, you know, I'll survive it if I go out for 10 days. Yes, you'll survive it. What about the damage? I think the other myth is, I'm already 40 years old, I'm already 30 years old, you know, ab jo hona tha ho gaya. I'm not dead yet. I am living proof that air pollution doesn't matter. And a lot of people, a lot of highly educated young people believe that. And I think there's a whole other myth that it's being touted to pull us down, and it's a political thing around making everyone win elections or fight this, fight that. It's a political thing to fight each other. It is not. Political parties might disagree, but air pollution is a real thing.
And is there other myths that if you go into a greener area, you'll somehow be impervious?
Well, people believe that, but I think what's really interesting is people believe that air is very polluted, so early morning you need to walk and take fresh air. That's a huge one. And even do, you know, pranayam. Yeah. Now, the point is that if you're breathing in lousy air, you're breathing in lousy air. In parks, and it's been measured, it's actually because of people walking, there's a lot of dust raised, and you actually are breathing in more particulate matter. So it's not true that, you know, you go into a green area and you're breathing in cleaner air.
And it's not true that if you hide in your home, you're
not true. And then there's this other thing that, oh, I just put some plants in my room and now I'm okay. No, you're not okay. Hello, the plants let out oxygen. That might take care of a small amount of carbon dioxide. If you want to take care of all the carbon dioxide that you emit through the night, you need so many plants that there's no place left for yourself. I mean, so don't overestimate the ability of plants. Plants also, I mean, the planet is collapsing, the planet has its limits. Yeah. Similarly, people say, oh, but I have all these trees, I'm okay. Look, trees have leaves, and leaves trap dust particles, and so maybe you'll have less dust particles. That doesn't mean you have less ozone. That doesn't mean every dust particle is caught. I mean, trees have trunks, and those trunks don't catch that much. So I think we need to stop hiding behind the trees, literally.
But you know, listening to you, one could also feel this complete sense of like despair, that okay, I'm not safe inside my house, I'm not safe inside, I'm not safe going for a run in a public park, I'm not safe exercising in my gym, I'm not safe with my air purifier on. If I'm a poor person, I can't even have this conversation because these options don't exist for me. So it is very much, in a sense, this discourse, the discourse of the privileged, people like us. But then you could give up and say, मैं कुछ कर ही नहीं सकती तो मैं क्या करूँ? I may as well just accept my fate. Now the important thing is to tell people that there are things that can be done, that those 11,000 buses or 13,000 buses could transform the debate, that changing crop patterns could transform the debate. So where would you start? Where would you ask people
I
to
would start first of all by telling people that first of all, you know, all of us, most of the privileged people have apps and they know the AQI. And I would say the day, and I like to start at home with semi-difficult things. The day the AQI is unhealthy, just don't have jharu done in your house, because a human being is doing that jharu, there is dust in your dusting, it's going into someone, and they're already breathing that horrible air. So spare the woman.
Yeah.
So I would start with that, but I would also say that if you run an organization or if you can influence, then see, not everybody can work out of home, many people have field work. But whoever can, figure out how we can start working out of home more and more. Now, home may not be a better place for the individual, but collectively, if you have less transportation, that contributes to a solution. Secondly, thirdly, I also say that when we ask for holidays for children, we need to remember that a huge chunk of our children go to government schools and live in slums. And there's no way, and 25% of Delhi's population lives in slums. So which kid is going to sit indoors? I mean, Chintan, we did a survey the last time and we said, what are kids doing on odd and even? And all the kids were playing cricket outdoors, and those who didn't play cricket were just anyway hanging out. So we need to also understand that we need to look at understanding that, okay, is can we give instructions every time you close down schools? Can we give instructions? Can we say no prams for the elite and tell parents in government schools that kid has to sit indoors? Which also means that your domestic workers shouldn't be coming to your house and leaving little kids alone. It's not a viable thing. So we need to be able to completely transform the way we work.
So you're saying closing down that school may actually be causing a new set of complications?
Yeah, but we could reduce it. I understand that there's a problem with taking kids to school. Reduce it by giving instructions, reducing by appealing to the elite, saying, hey, if there's a worker in your house with young children who have to stay at home, give them the day off, and so on and so forth.
And you're actually telling us, think the next time you're ordering online, at least.
I totally say, and I say, why wouldn't you ask the online people that, can you give me an option where you'll give it to me, send my book 10 days late, but can I just come by bus? Can I pay a little differently? And I think some people would take that option if they gave that to us. And I think the other thing we all really need to do is really think, really looking at air pollution, look at our own consumption. And something as simple as making sure that your security guards in your colony aren't burning the waste because they have to, because they're freezing to death. Give them a plug point, give them a heater, give them a place in which they can sit. Change the nature of community living is essentially one.
These are really important points because they're all in our control.
Yeah, and they're big things which are not in our control, but we are the voters.
Yeah, so in the end, you spoke about the micro things that we could all do at the neighborhood level, at the household level, at the
to reduce the frustration, the sense of, that's why I talk of that, because otherwise
people feel ki hum kya kar sakte.
Yeah, except to vote once in 5 years.
I haven't asked you that elephant in the room that causes so much political debate, the Diwali firecrackers.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I'll tell you this. My asthma was so out of control that for the first time ever, I left the city and I went to Udaipur. I looked online, what is not too far and the AQI is likely to be okay. And I went to Udaipur. And, the royal family always celebrates Diwali with the public. And influentially, they didn't burn any crackers this time. And I was, while their celebrations are happening without crackers, and the Janta was watching it, and it was extremely beautiful, and the whole place was only lit with diyas. I was looking at the anger on social media around crackers, and I was thinking, here you have the royal family of Mewar saying no thank you to crackers. A highly traditional royal family showing that you could still do it perfectly, the whole celebration, and there are all these angry people. And I really believe we should take a lesson from that episode of 2019. And I believe there's no need for crackers. I mean, what is Diwali? Diwali, you're celebrating the return of a god from exile and back to his kingdom. Why would you celebrate that by killing a whole bunch of people slowly? And why do you have to always, why do you have to think that everything is a conspiracy? It is not a conspiracy to stop fireworks. It's a plea for surviving and celebrating many Diwalis.
Finally, in terms of policy, where would you first turn your attention?
Buses. I would do buses, and here's what I would do. I would first of all put buses in Delhi. Gurgaon's done some work, but I would put them across the NCR. I would make it possible for somebody to sit in affordable, safe public transport. I would make it possible for a mother with 2 young children to go everywhere in an affordable public transport, mostly buses. Secondly, I would offer farmers the option of selling an MSP for millets, and I would say, do that, we will buy it and we will put it into our midday meal. And the third thing I would really consider, which I think is really important, is, and because it's doable, is I would look at putting people onto those buses. I didn't talk about that, but I really mean our two-wheelers and our freight people and our Swiggies and so on, and Flipkarts and Amazon, and I'd create incentives. I wouldn't chalao a danda. I would create incentives.
Economic incentives?
Not just economic, I might even give policy incentives. I mean, maybe you need permission to, roam around in our cities. Just because you're an enterprise, you can't roam around polluting. Maybe we will give you incentives if you can prove that you have a certain percentage that takes buses, and every year you're going to increase it over the next 3 years till you hit 85%, and make you, if I need something urgently, make me pay huge amounts, so that it's a disincentive for me to, want, my new cell phone day after morning in time for somebody's birthday. Thank you very much. But then you pay an arm and a leg. And that's how it should go.
Thank you for this conversation, because actually for the first time even I'm breaking it down in such small ways. Like, it's so much of it is just thoughtless, this is the extension of our lives. And
I think we have to fundamentally change both the pace of our lives and the nature of our works, and and the way that we eat. And if we change these 3 ways, and these are very hard things, but if you break it down into small doable components, every CEO in the NCR can actually play a huge role in reducing air pollution. If we just followed some of these things, it's very tough, but it's not that tough.
It's not impossible.
Oh, it's not at all impossible.
Thank you, Bharati. This has been a really useful conversation.
Great, I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Thank you so much.